Occupy Playground. Now that might sound a little weird because we heard all along over the last week and a half about Occupy Parliament, where the protesters went and they decided that they were going to occupy Parliament, right? They were going to protest there. They're not going to move. So is that the concept? So when you hear Occupy Playground, what is it that we're talking about here?
Yes. So this idea of occupying, came out of a series of protests in the early parts of the 2010s, where free citizens wanted to occupy places of physical locations of power. In our case, it just so happened that there was a school playground that misappropriated, grabbed, basically. So a very powerful government official at the time decided that he wanted to extend his car park into a school playground. So you can imagine how egregious that would be for a public school to lose 1.5 acres where the kids go to play during recess and during their breaks. And this is
so it was a school. And like we have in Barbados here, viewers, we normally have a playground attached to the school. Like, it's a regular thing. And here we have a picture of the kids here on the screen, and they, and some public official decide that they're going to just take the playground. And what were they going to create on the playground?
So it's not clear. It's still not clear what this individual wanted to do, but the adjacent property was actually public land. It was airport land, because this school it's an urban school, a very old public school, which has, a couple thousand kids, small, mid-sized playground. Kenya is a much larger country, and then it was attached or abutted into into another public piece of land for the airport. So this individual grabbed the airport, the small airport property, and put a private hotel, which actually stands to date. The name of that hotel is Western Hotel.
Mm-hmm.
So as they expanding it, they looked around, and the only direction they could expand, I think, the hotel, maybe some amenities on the hotel, maybe the parking lot, was into the public school. So what happened over the school holidays when the kids were not there, this individual basically walled off the school, the playground. So when the kids came back to school, they found that their playground, on their first day of school, they find that their playground has been grabbed.
So Nathan, Dr. Nathan, let me stop you there. So how old were these children? So the children, it's like now they're going off they're going on vacation, and they came back and found that there was a wall around their playground. Mm-hmm. And they could not use the playground to play football or to do anything else. And so tell me, what did these children do?
Yeah, so these are primary school going kids. So these are,
Yes, I was asking about the age of the children. So primary, so what age?
As you see in the pictures, these are, 13, 12, 13, 10-year-olds, kids, very young kids, who then, as you see from the pictures, decided that they were going to protest. So I think they had been worried about the grabbing because it was done relatively quickly. So the parents, the teachers, and the students quickly organized. Now, I want to say this very quickly, just so that you get some context here. We are very different generations in Kenya, and I think it's this kind of generation naming based on the decade or period when we were born, have very unique characteristics. So we have the baby boomers who are from the 60s and 70s, post-colonial. So it's the same in Barbados. Then we have the millennials like myself who are born and came of age in the early part of the millennium. Then we have the Gen X's who are slightly older, and then the Gen Z's who are these kids, so who are now in their late teens into their early 20s. These were born in the new millennium, so that's why they're called the Gen Zs. And the characteristics are very different. So our millennials will be very subservient because they came up in a colonial, post-colonial system. Not the, but the baby boomers will be very subservient. So my parents' generation. Then our generation were better educated. Our Gen Zs are very exposed, right? So the characteristics are very different in how they respond. And to our amazement, this group of kids challenged the status quo. They stood up against the riot police who had been sent with tear gas, with guns, with dogs to scare them off. And I think the person who was involved in this grab didn't realize that he was dealing with lions, young lions. Not
Wow. I have a video of it and I want to show Barbadians because this is interesting. We're talking here, guys, of young children, probably from about 6 years old in Barbados. Primary school, I think you start at about 6 years old. Yes?
6 to 7 years. Similar,
6 to 7 years old and probably up until about 12.
12.
11.
Yeah, 12, 13, 14. The oldest would have been about 14.
The oldest about 14. So between 6 or 7 to 14, okay, in their country. And here it is that they're about to take their playground. So as they're doing in Barbados, we're seeing development all over. They're taking over our beach spaces, all of our wetlands. They are just taking over our spaces in Barbados that we want to use for fun. We're now being told they're going to put up hotels. And these children said absolutely not. They decided to protest, and their protest was called Occupy Playground. You all realizing this thing? Look at their little faces. Occupy Playground. This is Kenya. Now, there's a reason Dr. Nathan Wangusi is telling you the story. But let's just watch it. Let me see if I can get this up for you to watch via video, okay? So you just get a little sense, right, of this entire thing.
It was the first day of school for students in public schools across the country. After several delays occasioned by the teachers' strike, eager students arrived bright and early, ready to tackle a new school year. But this was no ordinary school day, at least not at Langata Primary School. Just meters from the gate stood policemen in full anti-riot gear. News had circulated that activists had planned to stage a demonstration protesting the alleged grabbing of the children's playground by a private developer. Policemen arrived early to ensure no such thing happened. Officers posted at the school gate had the responsibility of ensuring that nobody except parents and students were allowed in, and only parents could come back out. But come 9 a.m., this state of affairs would change. Students from the school would band together, singing and chanting and holding placards condemning the grabbing of the field. Together and in the company of a group of activists, they would march out of the school toward the gate to the field in contention, fenced off in December while they were out of school. And here they would work together, banging on the gate and trying to push it out of the way. But just before it caved in, police officers jumped out of the gate, lobbing tear gas canisters at the children and causing a stampede as children ran blindly in every direction in search of a safe hiding place. Two students were injured in the stampede. The rest would run back to the school. They decided to approach the problem from a different angle. From inside the school, they pushed against and poked at the wall with all manner of objects until it came tumbling down. And with the barrier to the field out of the way, they poured into the plot of land they claimed as theirs. But their joy would be short-lived. Police officers stormed the field, lobbing more tear gas canisters, and a confrontation ensued, pitting the police officers against the school children and the activists.
Leave me alone!
3 more children were injured, and a total of 5 people were arrested.
You can arrest me but not beat me! You don't have a right to beat me!
One police officer who sustained injuries was led away, and his firearm was taken away by his colleagues. Police officers maintained that they were simply doing their job.
This is a disputed land, and it is one of the police functions to ensure that life and property is safeguarded.
Parents would later arrive to collect their children from the school, while the injured pupils were taken to Langata Hospital for treatment. Pupils who took part in the demonstration now left with haunting memories of the day the children's playground turned into a battlefield. Wilkisanyabwa Monday Special.
January 2015 was a pivotal moment in Kenyan history when riot police were unleashed on children at Langata Road Primary School in Nairobi, Kenya. They were protesting the grabbing of their playground by the then Vice President William Ruto in a protest known as Occupy Playground. In a meeting, a permanent secretary in his government expressed sympathy for the injured kids. My response was that I sympathize with the government, because these are lions, not lambs, empowered and fearless. This generation of kids, now adults, are now leading the Occupy Parliament movement to retake sovereign power for the Kenyan people. Our generation, Zion.
Wow.
Wow.
That is...
It's powerful.
It is really very, very powerful. Now, what do you, I mean, these children, I don't even know what to say. Now, what do you say to someone, or someone is actually saying, why did the parents get the children involved in a protest? Now, I must tell people that you were one of those adults, that you were there, and I saw you in the video. You were lifting up a little child. Was it a little girl or boy you had in your hand?
It was a little girl who I remained very close to. Now, you know, the nature of these protests in Kenya is that they are very spontaneous. So, you know, nobody was imagining, you know, not in our wildest dreams. And this is somewhat related to also the fact that we understand our constitution, which I carry with me all the time. And the preamble of our constitution says
but before you go, well, I guess you're answering the question because somebody wanted to know: is it that the parents put the children up to this?
No. So what I'm trying
to see.
We would never imagine, for instance, that the police would tear gas children. That has never happened, you know, not in Kenya before and not anywhere before. And in the Occupy Parliament protest, nobody imagined that the state would would shoot to kill Generation Z protesters. You don't go as an adult with that mindset. You don't imagine that there's that level of depravity that.
So that's why you were answering me about this. So you're trying to explain the psyche of Kenyans. Can you explain that? Why would little children feel that they could stand up to this developer who wanted to take their playground from them? What? Because I can't see that happening here in Barbados. Children are to be seen and not heard. Children would never be involved in a protest in this side of the world. What is so different?
I think let me just disclose this, I think, just so that the viewers have an understanding of, in fact, the gravity of this this confrontation. The developer was actually the then Vice President William Ruto. That's the allegation, because he's the one.
Hold a minute. So William Ruto was the developer. Did you all hear that, folks? This was 2015?
15. So the hotel is his. So, the allegation.
The hotel. So William Ruto, the developer was the Vice President of Kenya, William Ruto. He was taking this land from the children. Do you understand what's going on here?
Yeah, exactly.
Go, continue, sir. Continue.
Yeah, and we would never in our, even I was not an organizer. I lived very close to the school, so we would never in our wildest imagination think that a person would actually first grab a kid's playground and second attack them using state instruments of security and power. So when the kids were going out to protest, which is their, our constitution says that we have a right to protest, picket, and petition government, and that includes everyone from that is born, lives, and enjoys Kenyan citizenship. Doesn't distinguish between the age. So there are many instances where children are allowed to protest. Like the climate protests that go on in Europe. Those are kids who come out and speak forcefully about issues that are important to them. So no one imagined that that kind of depravity existed. So their participation in the protest was supposed to be secured by the police. The police are supposed to be there to protect the protesters, not to confront them. It was not a riot. There was no danger to human life, property. So the job of the police constitutionally is to protect protesters when they protest, including if they're kids or old people, whatever their issue is. So these children legitimately wanted to protest the grabbing of their playground. And instead of getting the protection of the state, they were confronted and attacked by the state, because the person who was driving this, that's the character of the person. Then 10 years later, I've made the point that, on one hand, we look at this and say, the kids were, they were innocent. But if you look at that video very carefully, and I remember I've made the point that I actually told certain very powerful government officials that you need to be very careful with this generation, because these are lions, not lambs. They know their rights. They're brave. They're very courageous. So the school had about, a subset, 1,000 kids from different neighborhoods in that part of the city. It's a good subset to tell you what is really going on in the minds of the children and how they're being educated and being empowered. So the actions by the children showed not so much the decisions by the parents, but individual decisions by these kids who understood fundamentally that they had a right to their playground and to education and to space and to recreation. You don't understand what they were saying, but they were saying it is our right. Haki yetu means this is our right as children.
Wow, so that's what the children were saying when they were chanting, it is our right.
Haki yetu, our right. Our right. It is our right to play.
But tell me something, because it is interesting, because these children, that was 2015, so we're talking about 10 years later now.
This is the same generation at a larger scale. And as I said, I remember very specifically talking to a permanent secretary in Kenya, and I told him, we have to be careful with this generation, because if we don't give them first opportunities, we don't open public discourse to them. I told him within a decade, there's going to be a revolt in this country. And he brushed it aside and said, these are what we call Cerelac babies, like softies. And in fact, when the Occupy Parliament movement started, parliamentarians, these are, ministers in the government came out saying, oh, these are kids that were born on Cerelac, they are softies, they know Uber and KFC, and they're going to go to the protest with their Ubers, and then, from there, take bottled water and go off to KFC and go home. And, it's a cautionary tale to people who are in power, that as we educate our young people, we need to make sure that we are also creating opportunities, but also opening public participation and public space for them to voice their opinions. Because when you start to compress or to silence dissent, I gather in Barbados from my few days here, that we don't even have an official opposition. It means you don't have that escape valve where people can actually express their opposition to like government policies. I picked up the newspaper yesterday and I saw something about the cyber crime bill, and you're not allowing people to give their opinions. I also looked at your constitution. It's supposed to be a progressive constitution that gives us freedom of conscience, freedom of opinion and association. And this kind of bills passing through parliament without any sort of interrogation, it's unacceptable.
I'm listening to you, and it is a joy hearing you, because there is such a freedom as you speak, and I'm listening to you and thinking about the children at the same time, and to know that you were actually right there among the children, because that's the town that you grew up in. Now, you said something to me last night. You said something to me last night when you were talking to me about this, and I was almost in tears. You said that you grew up not even being afraid of lions. Now, think about it, Barbadians. All of us, we know that lions are animals that we're supposed to be afraid of. Speak the truth. Everybody believes that. And I was talking to Dr. Wangusa about it, because I'm trying to understand, where would these children get this kind of courage? Because I started, you see them, the Gen Zs, and they're occupying parliament. And then you show me this video with the little children occupying the playground at 6 years old, 7 years old, pushing down a wall. Did you all see those kids pushing down the wall? You told me last night that the children pushed down the wall. And Dave and I both said, you mean they pushed down the wall? We didn't really believe you until we saw it on the video, that they actually pushed down the wall, right? Yeah. Because it's so many of them. There are lots of those other kids. And they started pushing at it, and then it fell down. And the walls fell down, and those are the kids went and started playing, because they got back their playground, right?
And by the way, yes, government was supposed to do a full apology to the kids. The ministers for state were sent there to apologize to them. The school playground was fenced off. A title was produced for them. A big signboard was put that this land belongs to Langata Road Primary School. And there were various cases filed in court. It also mushroomed into something else, where we realized across the country this was happening. School playgrounds were being taken over by developers. So there was a big audit that went on, where they looked at school playgrounds and worked on giving them title and private development.
So something came out of it. These children standing up, being tear gassed, that you see they stood up for something. But then I'm going somewhere with this. So, I was saying Rose and Fabian and Hurricane Writer. I'm trying to figure out what they're giving these children in Kenya. I'm seeing 6, 7-year-olds doing this. Now I'm looking on my TV, and I'm seeing on YouTube, I'm seeing young people that I would normally see in their phones, and you have to pull them to do anything. They're out on the street, and they are protesting about a finance bill. I'm thinking, what do you know about a finance bill? Why should they care? And why are they running towards the bullet? What's going on? And you said to me that in Kenya, lions are not feared.
Mhm.
Can you explain that to me? Because as somebody, us, the children of Africa that have come so far away from Africa, we are afraid of every wild animal, especially lions. And you tell me, talk to me about where the lions live in comparison to where humans live in Kenya. Talk to me.
Yeah, so I think let me preamble by saying that fear is learned. It's a learned emotion, right? You're told to be scared of something, be concerned that it'll affect you either physically, it can harm you, it'll eat you. You know, we are taught to fear things that we don't know, things that we
Yes.
think are scary, right? So this idea of like lions, for instance, being, you know, predatorial and being dangerous animals to human beings, it's a creation of Hollywood. Or I would even, you know, talk about, for instance, gorillas. A gorilla is actually a vegetarian. They eat only vegetables, right? Twigs and bamboo and leaves and things like that. But we are taught to believe that these things can actually eat you. So if you went to visit the Virunga National Park and sit
It's
with them,
true.
they're the most peaceful animals. And so are lions, by the way. Nairobi is the only city in the world. It's one of
You
the only
said
cities,
lions are peaceful?
very peaceful, very peaceful. Lions
Yeah.
also do not predate on human beings. The only time a lion becomes dangerous is if it's cornered, if it's injured, if it's old, or if it has children, if it has cubs, right? And it feels that it needs to protect those. But there are many instances. We have a city of 5 million people right next to a national park with prides of lions. And in the history of Nairobi, I do not know of one case of a lion attacking someone, although there have been many instances where we've actually seen lions in our communities. They don't naturally predate human beings. If you go to, for instance, a safari in the Masai Mara or Amboseli or Serengeti, if you go to a safari in any of those locations, have you ever heard of a tourist being picked out of a car? It never happens because they don't predate on us. So lions are very opportunistic, but they're very specific hunters. And so is the case with leopards and cheetahs and all these other animals that we think are very dangerous. So that fear is learned.
So you are saying that that lions. You said last night to me that sometimes you get up and you see the paws of lions where you all live in your community. So that means the lions have come were there.
Yeah, they come at night. They're very shy. They don't like to interact in any way with human beings. Because, by the way, lions actually fear human beings because we are the apex predator. We are an apex predator to them. But we don't have any instances of lion predation on human beings because we simply are not in their diet. And then we, in many African communities, by the way, particularly in East Africa, wildlife is revered as, you know, totems or mascots, as, you know, would the with cows, for both cultural and religious reasons. So we also don't hunt them. So there's no conflict between me and the, you know, the lions that live in the national park. I have no reason to like go near them, and they have no reason to come after me. So all that fear that is kind of sold to us, and I think we were talking about this in the context of like, why are the children in Kenya so bold in that respect? From when they're young, they showed, you know, in how they're responding to like government intrusion, but also now the same generation reacting to a punitive financial act, very fearlessly. And I think the big difference I would point out to is just the fear of the government, or the lack of knowledge about like how what government is doing affects us. All that is learned. It's learned behavior. It's conditioned behavior. And the rich and powerful will do that so that they can control the masses. In an island as small as this with 300,000 people, 200 years ago, you had to first enslave someone's mind before you enslave their body. And then you can control everything about how they think, they behave, and control pretty much their destiny. And that's what did not
Somebody's
happen.
saying here that they didn't know that lions were shy. They never knew that. What about the lionesses? And what about the lionesses?
So under certain circumstances, I mean, you're not going to go and start pulling a lion's tail and think everything is going to go well, you know. But if I guarantee you, and I actually want to ask the viewers to go on YouTube and Google motorbike guy passing by lion. There's a video that's gone viral in recent times that's on YouTube. And I have seen this myself. Lions will be like, you know, seated 100 meters away from you. They will not charge. They won't even pursue. If you look at any video today, open any video on YouTube where you have tourists in open vans looking at lions. They'll come. They're curious. They want to know. You know, they'll smell the cars, but they don't predate. They don't attack. Not that they can't jump in. It's just lions don't behave that way. You know that
Wow.
all the.
I know you're telling me, and I'm trying to put it in my head, and I think everybody who's listening are trying to get it in their head. So you also said, and I think it's important because that is what is going to help us to understand the children and even the Gen Z and the way they are responding to Ruto right now in Kenya. You said that you don't the parks. Right? You don't have fencing?
You don't need fencing. Why do you fence? Why? What is the fencing for? As I've said, and if you just go back to, I think that's the video I'm talking about. Exactly. That's the video I'm talking about. You don't see them predating.
Hold a minute. Right? This is like a regular person passing through the park?
Yeah. So the way in Kenya, the way many national parks actually in Africa, in Kenya, certainly this is the case. They're what they call conservancies. They're not national parks. So conservancies are places where humans and wildlife live together. So some sections will have only wildlife, some sections will have humans, and the humans have like a responsibility to take care of, you know, certain aspects of the national park, like, you know, making sure there's no trash and, you know, and this is not uncommon. You don't see the lion getting either startled or reacting adversely to a human being passing by. That is not uncommon.
Wow. No wonder, no wonder, because that means you're not harboring all of this fear that we have, and our fear has come through colonization. It's come through really what the white man told us about the animals, because they were hunting the animals and the animals were charging at them. So then they taught us, our white colonizers taught us to be afraid of the animals, but you grew up not being afraid of these animals.
No, there's no reason, because none of these animals predate on human beings. And one of the things I think I told you yesterday as well is that as I said, wildlife is revered. Kenya is one of the only countries in the world where we protect our lions and, you know, wildlife with guns. Our park rangers are very heavily armed, but nobody protects buildings with guns. We could protect our buildings with batons. So we understand that that's our heritage. These are our citizen wildlife, as we call them. Many of them have names. So, for example, one of the lions that lives close to our subdivision at home is called Queen McKenna. It's just a way to humanize them. And if you just think closely.
Queen McKenna. So you even named your lions.
Yes, ma'am. Our lions, our elephants, all of them are named.
You all hearing this thing? No wonder these children are like this.
So I was going to tell the viewers, think about why you think lions are dangerous. It's because you watched a Hollywood movie, right? With a crazy lion that's, you know, chasing and eating people in villages and things like that. But that actually never happens. Lions do not predate on human beings.
Wow. I am telling you, and I want you, we are not just telling you this in a vacuum. This is not a tourism thing for Kenya. We are trying to understand our DNA and who we are as a people, and the lies that we have been told, and the amount of fear that we live with. And that fear, we take it towards the people in authority, you know. And so can you talk to us about this Gen Z? You know, 10 years later, we're seeing these children, probably the same children that were pushing down that wall at 6, right? They're
Yeah.
now 15,
In,
or
in
they're
fact,
now 17, or they're now 18, and
Mhm.
they are now charging towards the parliament. Is that what's happening?
That's exactly true. In fact, I can confirm that I got messages during the protest from one or two of the kids who are actually at the at Occupy playground, and they were protesting as well. They were part of the protesting group at Parliament. Now, the context is different, obviously. The context is that there's a punitive finance bill that was proposed about 2 weeks ago. It's been in the works for some time now, with the IMF involved, trying to impose very punitive taxes on everything, including bread, sanitary pads and towels, basic health care, cancer treatment, money or any sort of transactions. They were trying to meet a very aggressive $2.7 billion budget by taxing the masses. And then this generation, our young generation, obviously Kenya population has grown from 9 million to 50 million in the past 70 years. And they were saying, hey, we don't have jobs. We don't have we have a good education. We don't have access to opportunities in our life, and the little that we have, for instance, like digital content that we're developing, you also want to tax that. You're making it bearable for many of us. So it started online, and there were hashtags going around, Occupy Parliament, Ruto must go, and it kind of spilled over into the streets early last week. So what initially was a popular revolt on social media became a popular revolt on the streets of Kenya, and started in the capital city and then spread like a wildfire across the country.
So, Dr. Nathan, I am trying to, I'm really, because I mean, listen to you from my, remember, we're on this side of the world, and we went through slavery and colonization. I know you guys went through colonization as well, but our heritage is also slavery. And so we have been beaten into subjection. We have been, our education system has been colonized. And so we have received that miseducation and misinformation that has made us, we are probably the Gen X, or some of people watching maybe baby boomers, where we know to say yes massa and no massa. And even if we don't say that now, we still operate with that fear within us. Now you said in addition to the fact that from a child, you understand that you don't even need to fear the lion. You live with the wildlife around you. You spoke to me about your education system, and someone, one Pigeon said to me, she said to me, Mrs. Weeks, there are set books that the children are reading. Can you talk to me about that? What kind of books would the children have as part of their education that would cause them to get out on the street like that? Talk to me about that, please.
So remember, one of the key pillars of slavery, whether it's this part of the world, in the Caribbean, in North America, in Latin America, was to keep the person who was being enslaved illiterate, uneducated, so that know how to write. They didn't know how to read. They did not know how to articulate and communicate. They did not know how to organize. They didn't know anything outside the four boundaries of the farm or the plantations where they were working, and the people who had enslaved them. And it was very effective because slavery went on for several centuries, for almost 4 centuries in many parts where it was practiced. And the colonizer understood that. So you keep them in ignorance and keep them compliant. Keep them in ignorance and keep them compliant. Those that were liberated, the first thing that needs to happen, you have to liberate not the body, but you have to liberate the mind, because the colonizer or the enslaver breaks, there's that process of breaking you in to understand you not have any choices, you don't have any freedoms, you don't have any control over your destiny. So if you want to take back that power, the first thing you do is you have to re-educate the mind. And re-educating that doesn't mean learning how to read and write. It doesn't mean that. It also means understanding what your rights and responsibilities as a citizen are. I've just been looking at the Barbadian constitution. It's not very far from the Kenyan constitution. It gives those inalienable rights to Barbadian citizens, right? It gives sovereign power to the people. It starts its preamble by stating that we assert our freedom as Barbadians. So bringing that principle and that philosophy to life means that Barbadians need to read, right? In Kenya, what has happened, as you're saying, with our educational system, and I don't even know that the powers that be, the William Rutos of this world, understood that this is what was happening in our school system after our new constitution, which is by far the most progressive, was passed in 2010. A lot of other new things happen in the education system. So, for example, they started reading more revolutionary books like Animal Farm, which is a story about animals that were enslaved in a farm by pigs, and the pigs became oppressive. And then one day the pigs, one day the farm animals revolted. And when you plant
so this is required reading for all of the students,
right? So while
because we sometimes we read Animal Farm, but it's only a certain section of the school, only if you're doing literature. If you're doing English, right, then English literature, then you study, but everybody doesn't read, so it's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so this is a required reading because English is actually at high school level, it's required reading for every student. So every Kenyan kid who has gone through the public school system has read through or has delved into like the meanings of these books. And there are other books in Swahili and English, like the Old Parliament, right? So this is a book about like a group of a parliament that was dysfunctional and oppressive to the population. So when you have a group of kids who are reading this kind of literature coming out of the school system, they understand their constitution, because the constitution is being breathed into life. You don't just, you write the constitution, not everybody gets to pick it up, right?
So you have your constitution, you travel with your constitution.
I always hold on to my constitution. It's one of the most treasured books for me because it was signed by our Chief Justice at the time. But I spent time actually reading through it and trying to understand not just the words, but what is the spirit and letter of this constitution.
Did you all hear that, Barbadians? We skip over that a bit. I know I'm interrupting a bit because I want us to I'm doing it deliberately. Okay. So you travel with your copy of your constitution, because you kept talking to me about that last night and saying that the people understand the constitution, and that's why the children were saying it's my right. And so they believe it, and you travel all the way to Barbados. Show us again the copy of your constitution. Show us your constitution again. Wow. He travels with his constitution.
I travel with my Bible and I travel with my constitution. And then it also permeates into our social consciousness through art. It permeates through social media, because statements like reject means that we have a right to exercise our constitutional rights to reject a legal proposal from government or from the executive. We are the fourth arm of government, right? You have your judiciary, you have your executive, you have your legislature, and then you have the people. You have the people. You're the fourth arm of government. So you have to do your part as well. So I think the fact that it's permeated through various mediums, as I said, you find it in the public square where people discuss about, what are my rights? Police can't just pick me up off the streets. I had this experience yesterday, and I want to talk to you about, to Barbadians about this, briefly. I went to, I was with a friend, and we went to a mall in town. And then as we were coming into the mall, I saw a young man being arrested. He had been stopped by, a group of very heavily armed police officers. And I understand that the crime and there's a need to control, the levels of crime in any society. But that does not give police the right to do arbitrary arrests, because that's denying someone their freedom on the basis of like a mere suspicion. And obviously, when you have a system like that, it turns into something that can be used and leveraged by government or by prejudiced people to oppress a particular, demographic. He was a young man. I even asked that person, would a person of color or a white person be stopped by these police officers and like ransacked like that? They said even if they were smoking, illegal substances and had them in their car, they would be safe from that sort of. So your typical Kenyan would not accept an arrest without due process, and that's why part of the protest was on. And in fact, the government has done this. They've done abductions, and people would take videos. They would, there's been lawsuits, and people are pushing back because they understand that they're the fourth arm of government.
So the people understand that they are the fourth arm of government.
Yes.
The people understand they are the fourth arm of government.
Yeah.
Do you let that sink in for a moment?
Let me revise that, because when I read the Constitution, I'll tell you what it says, the preamble, and I'll read it word for word. All sovereign power belongs to the people of Kenya and shall be exercised only in accordance with this Constitution. The people may exercise their sovereign power either directly or through their democratically elected representatives. So we are the first arm of government.
So, okay, you are the people are the first arm. Read that again. So this is the Constitution that this doctor travels with his Bible and his Constitution, and he's saying to us that the children that we see on the Gen Zs out there, they understand the Constitution, that they are the first. I said the fourth, but it's really the first arm of government. Read it for me, please.
Yeah, so the third preamble says sovereign power under this Constitution is delegated to the following state organs, right? So sovereign power, the power to govern by consent, is delegated. So I delegate my power to govern to Parliament and legislative assemblies at the county level, national executive and executive structures at the county level, the judiciary and independent tribunals. So it's actually spelled it out that we are the first arm of government, followed by Parliament, our elected officials, the executive, then the judiciary. So if we clearly understand that that is our mandate, then we have a responsibility to protect our own constitutional freedoms and rights. And I would argue that applies, anywhere that you have a people who are free, like Barbados.
Wow, that is some knowledge. That is some knowledge. That's some understanding. That is walking in some understanding. And not, when we look at even our Constitution here in Barbados, it basically says the same thing that you're saying.
Same thing, right? That you delegate your sovereign will to govern to these people because you want an organized society. But if they fail, in fact, the U.S. Constitution takes it further and says that if a government becomes oppressive to a people, which is the case, when we had the 1776 revolution in the U.S., but when a government becomes oppressive to a people, they have a God-given right to oppose and usurp that government. I'm not advocating here for coups and things like that, but the principle is to assert that the sovereign will of the governed comes from them. It does not come from government. So government servants, not the other way. Therefore, you're the ones
Right.
who are telling them what needs to happen. You're supposed to interrogate what they think and what they do. And furthermore, it is you to make sure that they also understand this principle. And I think in Kenya that has happened progressively. You know, when Gen Zs took this principle to the streets and said, we have a right to be heard, and our opinions on this financial bill and in matters governance in Kenya are not being heard, then we will exercise that sovereign power directly.
So, sir, you're saying to me that so in addition to them knowing their constitution and reading the set books, I'm sorry, I'm processing it as well. Okay, so they're set books that they have to read in school, and they understand the constitution. Do they teach civics? Is civics something that's taught? Explain that to me. How is that taught?
Yes. So from very so Kenya still follows sort of in its most rudimentary form the British system of education, but the one of the mandatory subjects is government history, and civics. So government covers how the government is organized, you know, the constitution, the various constitutions, how they transitioned from single party or from colonial rule to single party rule to multi-party democracy to our new constitution passed in 2010. So kids will from a very young age to, you know, from primary school through to high school. You know, maybe it'll also be continued in university depending on what subjects that you take. But you see that means that the general population understand their rights and their responsibilities, right, as citizens. What I think has happened, which was not the case before, you know, every generation of Kenyans since independence went to school and they were taught basically the same things in school, depending on, you know, what point in history they were. But what has happened is that after 2010, this constitution was very progressive, but then there's been a lot of work in the civil society groups, in government itself, to be fair, in the education system, in the arts, in the arts and music particularly, to talk about what it means, right? That it means that we can make decisions in the following ways. If they pass legislation, we have a right to interrogate it. If they propose legislation, we have a right to participate in that process. And you know, no one could have estimated that it would come to this, where that right would be pushed to its limit, to where young people say that we even have a right to occupy our own parliament. But this is where we are as a country, and you know, it's a progressive position to be, but it's also one that has pushed our leaders to rethink what their responsibilities and roles as servants of the people are.
Wow. I mean, when you look at the face of these young people, look at their faces, everybody. We see exactly what Dr. Nathan Wagunsi is saying to us, that these children grew up without fear. There is a fearlessness within these children. I wish we could just see that picture again, of this particular picture. These are young people that we were looking at a while ago. Absolutely no fear. You could just look at them, and there's an energy that is coming from them, and it is from they were born. Right up until now, how they've been taught. They're taught civics. They understand who they are. They understand their constitution. They believe they have a right, and they walk in that. So though we are all of black skin, they look like us, but their mindset is different. It's totally different. They are totally different, though they look like us. It's powerful, the thought and thinking, because just that understanding that you are there, you do not need to be afraid of wild animals. That alone will empower you. I am telling you, that alone will let you walk like a king and a queen. And then you're learning civics, and then you understand the Constitution. Yeah, and that you have delegated governance to those who are governing, and you are really the one in charge. You understand that. That's why you're going to say, I'm going to occupy my playground at 6 years old, and I'm going to occupy Parliament.
My Parliament.
Wow, I tell you. Somebody has a question here, because this is very, before I ask this question, someone asked, and I don't remember the name, but I wrote it down. They said, how does this improve? I think it's Everton or somebody. Mm-hmm. How does this improve the life for us, Mrs. Weeks? They're asking, how does this topic improve the life for us in Barbados and the Caribbean? Am I missing something? Because they're thinking, why aren't we talking about what we're facing in Barbados and in the Caribbean? Why are we talking about this? How does this improve the life of us in Barbados? What would you say to that person, Dr. Nathan?
I'd say two things. So the first is, why does the person in power today, or the institutions in power, I gather that we have a one-party state basically in this country. Why do they want it that way? If it was not important, why not allow an official opposition in Parliament? So whatever they're holding back, or whatever they're trying to protect, is valuable. That's why they do what they're doing, right? That's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is, your common needs and common interests are defined and brought to you by your government. So whether that's your water supply, economic opportunities for young people. I've walked around the island, and let those who have eyes see. I've seen what I've seen. There's a lot of young people who are dispossessed and disillusioned. It's very obvious to me. Outside all the glitz of a tourist destination, you can see that there's sections of the population who do not have opportunities. And those opportunities can only be brought forth if you have good government, right? If you have a ruling or governing institutions that are responsive to the needs of people or the economic needs. So instead of deploying I heard about the criminal incidents that happened, and young kids turning on each other, and they do that because you can either assume it's because they're criminal minded, or you can understand that it's because they don't have anything else they would be doing, right? A young man who's selling drugs on the streets or robbing a house is, of course, with the rule of law, you have to take action. But then the systemic problem there is that these young people do not have opportunities. And that's because government is not meeting its mandate in the way maybe it writes its budgets, the way it prioritizes job creation, or where it prioritizes job creation, because it's also not being held to account. Our finance bill, for example, would have been devastating for young people. But then the fact that we have a vibrant opposition, but an even more vibrant first term of government, meant that they had to rethink and instead implement austerity measures. One of the austerity measures that I think would be very interesting for you to learn about, because I think it's the same here. We know a bit about how the leadership. We've seen them in our country, and we wondered, how you come all the way from Barbados to here, and then we see you hopping around, Western capitals. We know that. We've seen that. We follow the news. And one of the austerity measures that came out of this push by the first term of government, the people, was that unnecessary foreign trips by government officials have been furloughed, have been stopped. Any shows of opulence, any new purchases of cars, any new renovations, We had something called the confidential budget that some government officials had. The office of the first lady, the office of the second lady, the office of the prime cabinet's wife, all those have been abolished. So the money that would otherwise have been used for development, and I would also add the queen of the skies, but the money that would have been used for development was being, misspent and being embezzled, basically. So that's going to make a difference, because that money is going to end up one way or another. It's going to end up in the pockets of Kenyans. So that's why it's important.
There's another. Thank you so much. There's another question on the screen. Was there organized government in Africa before the colonizers arrived? And do the people have a right of civil disobedience if the government abuses its power? Well, we can see that they do. No, the answer to number 2 is what we've been seeing happening for the entire week. But how about the first part of the question?
Yes. So the answer to that question is yes, and also no. Africa is a very big continent. It can fit most of the other continents within it. So it can fit the US, China, and mainland Russia in it. It's a very big continent. It's also a very diverse continent. So there were very many different forms of government that were present in many parts of the continent. In West Africa, mostly there were kingdoms. So we've heard about the Dahomey Kingdom. That is actually where most of the slave labor was drawn to bring to the African diaspora here in the Caribbean and Latin America and North America. Also because of proximity and because of the trade routes that existed. So there were kingdoms in Western Africa. There were also kingdoms in some parts of East Africa. So like Ethiopia, there's a very old monarchy that was there. In some parts of Kenya, some parts of Uganda, there are monarchies. The Baganda Kingdom, the Wanga Kingdom, the Rundi Kingdom, the Rwandan Kingdom. In Zimbabwe, there were also kingdoms. In South Africa, there was the Zulu Kingdom. There's some of these kingdoms still exist. So like this, the current government of Swaziland is a monarchy. The current part of the current government in Uganda is also a monarchy, the Baganda Kingdom. So there were quite a number of those types of societies. There are also military societies. So like the Maasai, for example, who are very militant. So they would form basically military structures around how they govern their country, their communities.
Yeah.
And then there were some communities, like the community where I come from, it was governed by a council of elders. So leadership was very flat. It was not hierarchical. What was absent was literacy, like written in many of the societies. In places like Ethiopia, there was already scripts and writing in ancient. Remember ancient actually African. They make us believe that these ancient Egyptians were white people with straight hair, but they were just Africans like you and I. So it depends on where you are, but yes, there was many formalized systems of government.
Yeah. So this is such an education, I say to you, Dr. Nathan Wangusi, and you've answered a lot of questions for me. I'm sure you're not trying to say Kenya is a perfect place, but
no,
what we are talking about is identity, and I think a lot of us. Some people, this is going to go way over your head because you are focused on what's happening in politics right now. You're looking at what's happening right now. Oh wow, he dropped out. I think he's going to come back in. So for a lot of you, it's going to go over your head. But what we are doing this evening, we are talking here about empowerment. Okay, tonight this is about empowerment. It's about empowerment. It's about an understanding of who we are. This is the understanding that we should have had about ourselves when we were teenagers. So that a lot of this nonsense that is happening in the country right now, we would not take it. Because if we were being trained as we were, if we had this understanding that we have, that the way how Kenyans see themselves, and we have that in Barbados, the things that we are dealing with in Barbados, to propose, to believe that they could propose a cybercrime bill like this to Barbadians, they would never even conceive of it. Do you really think that cybercrime bill like this could work in Kenya, when they created a whole digital protest against William Ruto? You believe they could propose a draconian cybercrime bill as they did to Kenya? Is this all over Africa? No, it's different. But we're talking about this specifically, they're explaining to you the mindset of the Kenyans. And a lot of us tonight, because we're not getting into gossip, and we are not cursing the government, and we are not talking about politics, we can't receive this because it's going over our heads. But we need to let it get into our minds and into our spirits. I think Dr. Nathan is back in. We dropped out there a bit a while ago. Welcome back.
Thank you. Sorry, it just cut off briefly.
Yes. I think that is this is important. I know we've gone over the time that we really more than what we thought we would have you on for, but
yeah.
I'm going to do another 10 minutes of this because it is so good. Esther Blue is saying, I am loving this discussion, Marcia. We need more of this kind of teaching. I was reading that. We need more of this kind of teaching a little more often. I agree with you, Esther, because what it's doing, it's building up our mind. This is so important. Galvez is saying we are all free sovereign beings born with God-given rights. And we talk it. The thing is, do we actually believe it? That's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing. Yeah. But let me get back to you, Dr. Nathan. Is there anything else you want to say to us here, on this side of the world? What do you want to say to us?
To tie this all off, there's a very famous song by Bob Marley, who was an African from the diaspora, one of our prophets. The song is Iron Lion Zion, right?
Iron Lion Zion. I can't play it, but I'm going to try the lyrics, because if I play it, I will get in trouble with YouTube. But let me try to find but you keep talking. Go ahead.
So this song has actually become an anthem for the Generation Zs. And in fact, in Kenya, we call them our Generation Zion, from that song. So
Generation Zion.
Generation Zion. And there's a scripture from Isaiah that says, "Rise up, Generation Zion. Rise up, Generation Zion, and drop off the shackles of slavery that are upon you." I think that is what is happening in Kenya, that we have a generation of young people who have made a collective decision that they are going to assert their sovereign right over their affairs, over their country. And I think that lesson is true anywhere. There have been mushrooming of protests in other parts of Africa, in Ghana, in Ghana, in Uganda. And not to say you should, usurp your government, but you should assert, you should rise up and take back your country and take your society in the direction that you as a people collectively desire, through not just your first and your other arms of government, but in the way that you live as a society. And when you have a government that is not responsive, passing oppressive, and in fact, I read the cyber bill, and it goes into the realm of the ridiculous.
So say that again. I want you. I'm going to feature you on the screen as you talk to us about that cybercrime bill. You just said something. Keep going.
I was saying the cybercrime bill. It goes into the realm of the ridiculous, if you ask me. This could not fly in Kenya in any democratic society where you assert freedom of speech as a right. Then you say if you say something or make a tweet or make a comment online that annoys a government official, giving special status to this individual who is you elected, then you can be imprisoned for up to 7 years or given a fine of $70,000 or both. That's just, it's way out there, but it has happened because the powers that be believe that they're entitled to do that, right? And that the people who are their subjects, not their fellow citizens, should live in line. So that's just it is not even neo-colonialism, this is neo-slavery, in a sense, where you're trying to manage the affairs and lives of people. And that I'll sound this as a warning, that when you do that, when you accept that kind of legislation, that kind of enforcement, others follow. If you follow any society where oppression has become the rule, the law of the land, it always starts with the little things, right? It starts with the cybercrime bill, then they'll be controlling your access to information, then the next time they're controlling your ability to vote, and it goes on and on and on. And before long, you're back to a society where your fundamental freedoms are compromised. So that's just a caution that not just to the population, the people, but also the leadership. That once you start going down that slippery slope, it never stops. So they should consider. It is not wrong to make legislation around digital privacy, for example. It's not wrong to make laws around like cyber crimes, but then to take it to the extent that I'm hearing here in Barbados, that's by all stretch of my imagination quite ridiculous, and I don't know that it would fly in any other part of the world. Given that you don't have an opposition to actually like interrogate these laws, that responsibility falls on the people on this call. It falls on the people who are walking on the streets, right? Who, whether or not you like it, will be affected by these bills, these types of legislation. Because if you have one down the pike, another is coming, right? It's a cautionary tale. We hope that our collective interests, as I was just reading a comment, but we hope our collective interests are represented. We hope that in Kenya, for example, there's been a positive response to our protests, where government has actually conceded. They pulled out the finance bill and give very many concessions on what they need to do moving forward in terms of managing corruption and managing public expenditure, and that should just show that it is, if it's possible in Kenya, it's possible anywhere in the world. And we draw, and as I said, we've drawn inspiration from songs that came out of the diaspora. This generation of Kenyans, our Gen Zs, our Generation Zion, as I said, I told this government official, these are lions, they are not lambs, and I believe the same spirit and the same conviction can be found here in Barbados and other parts of the Black diaspora.
Yes, correct. We are lions and not lambs. Let me just read. I don't know if Dave can put the lyrics of the Bob Marley song on the screen. I'm not allowed to play the song because of copyright issues with YouTube. But I just want to read the lyrics of this song, Bob Marley's song. It says, "I'm on the rock and then I check a stock. I have to run like a fugitive to save the life I live. I'm going to be iron like a lion in Zion. I'm going to be iron like a lion in Zion. Iron like a lion in Zion. I'm on the run, but I have got no gun. See, they want to be the stars, so they're fighting tribal war, and they're saying iron like a lion in Zion, iron like a lion in Zion, iron, lion, Zion. Yeah, I mean, this is it, the lyrics is just powerful. I'm sorry, I can't play it. I'm on the rock running and you running. I take a stock, running like a fugitive. I had to run like a fugitive just to save the life I live. I'm going to be iron like a lion in Zion. I am going to be iron like a lion in Zion. Iron, lion, Zion. Everybody, I hope you are saying it at home with me. Iron, lion, Zion. Iron, lion, Zion. Iron like a lion in Zion. Wow, that is powerful. Powerful indeed. And this song was written, you see, that's why I say, you know, Doctor, we are so powerful. We are so powerful because here it is that Bob Marley, I mean, his heritage is slavery. I mean, because his ancestors then were enslaved, but he could get a level of consciousness to write a song like this that today is now empowering the Gen Zs in Kenya.
Yeah.
Isn't that something? And that's what I want to say to Barbadians, that we are not what they say that we are. They say we are passive. That is not us. That is not us. Iron like a lion in Zion. That's who we are. That is exactly who we are. And I'm hoping that we could be empowered by this and not asking, what's the use of this kind of discussion? How is it going to help our young men who are killing themselves? Can you imagine a question like that? We have to move ourselves to another level of consciousness. There is, I see Lumumba Batson. Let me see. I see him on twice. Let me see if this one is going to work. Is he on? Hi, Lumumba. Good night. Lumumba. Okay, he's not hearing me. Okay, let me try this.
Hearing me? Okay, let me.
Hi, Lumumba.
Hi, Lumumba.
Hello, Lumumba. Yeah, we're getting some
challenges. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, so we're getting some feedback there. There's some feedback that I wish he could have come in here and just say a few things for us. Well, Dr. Wangusi, I really don't want to keep you too much and take up your entire Friday night, but this is, you know, I could tell you this has been like a wonderful plate of beautiful food. It's been rich, you know, and really, really, really powerful. And for me, I love this kind of education because it's changing my consciousness. And it's not, you know, I'm not just regurgitating things that I've heard, but I'm being challenged. My mindset is being challenged, and my conscious, I'm being raised to a different level of consciousness. And for me, that is powerful. And I want to say thank you so very much. Like a lion, I'm iron like a lion in Zion. I love it. And I wish I had this level of consciousness when I was much younger. But I'm here right now and I'm embracing it. Thank you so very much, sir.
Thank you for having me.